It got much better. It got much better. All right, we got one more minute. We'll get started.
So Donna, I just tried pushing record to the cloud. Oh, never mind. It's recording.
Did it?
Yeah, it did. It's recording.
Good.
I just checked to see, and usually it does that notification, but I guess because it already did, it doesn't do it twice. So we're good.
We did get a second notification, but I didn't pay attention to it. So,
Oh, you
okay.
did? Okay.
All right, we are going to get started, my friends. Welcome to our fourth night. Appreciate you coming. Some of you have been here every week. We have Svetlana, say your last name, Svetkovich, and Rebecca
Yes.
Miles. I know, I have a tough one too. So I'm going to start with Svetlana. She is a credentialed reading specialist with a master's in literacy and leadership, having most of her classroom experience in elementary and middle schools. She was a second grade teacher for 7 years, and year after year, over half of the class started the school year reading at about a kindergarten level. Having just completed her dissertation defense with a joint doctoral program at San Diego State and Claremont Graduate Universities, her research focuses on bridging the latest neuroeducational findings with classroom literacy instruction, specifically in K-2 preventative reading and spelling approaches. With a long-standing interest in equitable resources for Title I schools and emergent bilingual students, Svetlana's vision is to disrupt the nation's reading failure status quo through research-validated early literacy practices so that far more students are on a path to becoming skilled readers from the very first day of kindergarten. She currently serves as a private remediation specialist for clients of all ages and varying learning disabilities, to include dyslexia, upon utilizing EBLI and speech-to-print principles. Very impressive, Svetlana. I wish you well. Rebecca Miles is an early literacy consultant, coach, and PBIS coach for a county in Southwest Michigan with 18 years of experience. She impacts pre-service teachers as a reading methods instruction at Holy Cross College in Notre Dame, Indiana. Rebecca received a BA in elementary education at Western Michigan University with additional endorsements in early childhood, social studies, and science. She holds a master's of literacy studies degree from Western Michigan University with an additional reading specialist endorsement. Rebecca's 19 years of experience include both MTSS and literacy coaching, reading intervention, and classroom teaching at multiple grade levels from developmental kindergarten to middle school ELA and science, as well as participating in successful school transformation. Her primary focus is working with teachers and administrators in assessing needs and integrating multi-tiered systems of support for K-5 literacy, including coaching, building level teams in data analysis, developing and modeling high-quality, evidence-based literacy instruction to ensure momentum and growth around all things literacy. Rebecca is also the parent of 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren. 2 of her children are neuroatypical, 1 due to dyslexia and 1 to brain cancer. Welcome, Rebecca, for being here and taking time out of your nerdy vacation to be here. So we will get started with chapters 9 through 12 are being covered tonight. And so take it away, ladies.
Okay, and then Donna, you're gonna do the moderating on any kind of chat questions. So we'll stick with that format. Any chat stuff, stick it in there, and then Donna will be sure to read those out loud for us and keep us on track.
And everyone stay muted, please, as best you can. Thank you.
Yes, and then my internet is unstable. I'm dealing with internet crisis today, of course, but I'm on my hotspot, so hopefully it stays with us. So I'm really honored to be here tonight and humbled to try my best to represent this pioneering woman, Diane McGuiness, and these final chapters here for this wonderful book overview that we've been experiencing together. Chapters 9 through 12 is the final section, and she titled it as Practical Solutions. I do like that because that's kind of what my whole premise is as a researcher and previous to that now, or a practitioner, so it's perfect. Some of you saw my little sneak peek here. I shared this picture with several people this week. Again, it's reminds me of me as a classroom teacher, as a second grade classroom teacher with kindergarten students or kindergarten level reading students, frazzled feeling, where do I go? Where do I turn? Where are the answers? And I couldn't find the answers. And now finally, that I'm out of the classroom, I think I finally have found the answer. But this is still me after this whole dissertation process. So bear with me, I lose some of my words or thoughts this evening because I'm still in my revision process for the dissertation, but it's almost done. All right, chapter 9, beginning reading right. I think this was the big idea of chapter 9 and these points that she sort of reminds us about what a good reading program entails. And we know that we need to be sure we're training the phonemic awareness aspect, that children understand the alphabetic principle. This keeps coming up in the conversations we've had in chapters prior to this. And knowing that the code is reversible, I think that is key, knowing that it works both ways and that it's a sound to symbol relationship. We're focusing on the sounds that are coming out of our mouths. What are we hearing? And then assigning some letter symbols to those sounds in that order. Logic is progressing from simple to complex, but she emphasizes this happens rather quickly. We're not staying in CVC land for 100 years. We're getting through that and getting into the complex part of the code as quickly as we can. The pedagogical style is brief with clear explanations as the child is actively problem solving. We touched upon this on our last conversation. I think that is key, that they're not just sitting there passively being told a lot of different rules and regulations of how English works, that they're actively trying to sound out these symbols within the context of words and sentences. And the frequent monitoring, that it's fail safe, that you are there checking to see that they're advancing through this code as quickly as possible. And if they're not, something is potentially wrong with the instruction. Some key quotes that we picked out here were on page 210, that most importantly, you need to hold the firm belief that all children can be taught to read. If you base your thinking on a deficit model, this will mean you won't expect rapid progress. The teacher of a young reader is the custodian of that child's destiny. And these just really resonated with me because my dissertation is actually about teacher beliefs and how that might influence instruction. And there was some connection that I discovered. Dr. Jan Hasbrook, I linked her statement here, 2021. These, when I reread Diane McGuiness, I read her about 1.5 years ago, but this is my second reading of her, but it made me think of Jan Hasbrook because in her statement, 2021, she said that there's large body of evidence that shows 95% of our students can achieve grade level or really close to it. And so if we don't believe that, and if that's not happening, then we need to reconsider what we're doing in instruction. Are there any thoughts on this in the chat before we go, I guess, to the questions? I do have the questions here, but I'll pause for a second if anybody wants to touch on either Jan Hasbrook or if anything gets,
We have a 100% agree comment.
Okay, great. Then I'll move on. Here are the guiding questions that we have in in that shared document. And number one is, which major component of a good beginning reading program do you think educators or parents find the most disruptive to their understanding of how children learn to read and why? So it's on page 212, which I kind of talked about earlier. And then respond to this statement: depending on the age and aptitude of the child, when lessons begin, this sequence, sound, letter, letter, sound, should take about 4 to 8 months. Do you think educators in schools believe this is possible? Do you think this is possible? And again, goes to my previous slide about beliefs and how that is a very key determining factor, I believe, in the success students make in the classroom. And then I added this little quote here. I love it. It's my mantra. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. So reading these guiding questions made me think of that quote, because we need to think about what we're doing and not necessarily what's wrong with the child. Again, that deficit mindset. What are we doing in the instruction that can help this child move quickly and rapidly through this code? So Donna, if you can read some of the chat, I'm going to open it up too, but I see there's a couple chats.
So we had Karen Johnson said, as a second grade teacher, I'm very aware of how critical my work is. The third quote strikes a wholesome fear in my heart. And I think that's from the other page.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer Newman said, I think, okay, we'll go back to that. The teacher of a young child. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, teacher of a young child is the custodian of that child's destiny. Teacher of a young reader is the custodian of that child's destiny.
How true. And you only get one chance.
You do, and it's especially, we're finding it's super young. We are finding that before first grade, in fact, if they're struggling, they're going to continue to struggle through their academic journey. And so that window is very, very narrow. So the K1 setting is especially critical here.
But what have we been told? They'll grow out of it.
Yep.
He's a boy, all those comments, right?
Mm-hmm. We have to wait for there to be a big enough gap for them to get tested.
That's right.
All
those comments we've all heard. So Jennifer Newman says, I think this is huge. So many teachers I've worked with believe the problem lies with the child, not with their instruction. That is so true. And Nora Van Arkel said, I love the quote that as teachers, we are the custodians of a child's ability to learn to read. Great quote. Kathleen De La Rosa said, my concern about 95% of students have the capacity to read at grade level with the right instruction. Admins in my school will flip that on teachers. Teachers have the capacity of having almost all kiddos reading on grade level, but that is only possible with help. Interesting. Wow. And Jennifer says, I think that emphasizing letter sounds over letter names is a big hurdle for teachers, as it is really knowing all the phonemes of English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you, Jen. I just want to add to that, and we'll touch on that, I think, in chapter 10, but for waiting so long, think about kindergarten instruction, or the current curricula right now is typically kindergartners go from September to December, and the focus is a 1 letter a week. 1 letter a week focus, September through December.
Yeah,
you wasted 6 months now of time where they could have been actually blending and segmenting sounds, and not so much worried about that letter name. So this, I think, is a real, talks about that in, I think, chapter 10 or 11 about starting right. Yeah, chapter 10. In that kindergarten grade, especially. And I think that the letter name situation or sequencing there that we're so used to traditionally, thinking that we have all the time in the world, but we really don't now, because the rigor has increased so much with the Common Core and all the things that have happened in the last decade. We don't have time to spend one week per letter before we start blending and segmenting sounds and words.
Sharon Dunn, who's a former principal, I know, and has has implemented strong systems and structures, says they need to be in place to apply the SOR tenets. And she should know because she turned a school around.
Wow.
Amy Manning, I also wonder if the Common Core foundational skills presents a misconception of what kids are capable of doing at each grade level. Interesting. Melissa says, absolutely, still 1 letter a week in our kindergarten class. They are adding some vowels, but not enough to get reading moving. Catherine Johnson said, I just started some of the speech to print techniques this year, like teaching the, is that AE sound? And it doesn't make sense.
I think A.
It's just the A sound and all of its possible spellings at the same time. And it seemed crazy to many of my coworkers who think it is confusing to the students. But my students learned more of the code and they were more successful than I thought. It made sense to my first graders.
Yep, exactly. That's a huge point, is to stop thinking about what makes sense to the administrators, or administrators have to stop thinking that they're the ones that it's important for. Outcomes is what should drive everything. What's logical for those kindergartners and first graders? That's what should be driving what we do in the classroom.
Well, like she said, her coworkers were doubting it. Well,
yeah,
you need to try it before you start criticizing it, is what I like to say. Rebecca said, what is the ideal pacing for a kinder student regarding explicitly teaching letters and sounds?
According to Reading Simplified, it could be done in about 13 weeks. They can get to the advanced code. So Marnie Ginsburg, she has it pretty mapped out simply and quickly. Nora with Ebley, similar. It's not as scripted, I guess, in terms of like, okay, do this, this, and that. It's more, there's a lot more implicit learning happening, but they are advancing into multisyllabic spelling and reading at that kindergarten age at 5 and 6, and they're doing it with no problem.
And our local schools get them in easily by January. By January, we can do some testing with nonsense word fluency. They're blending, they're segmenting, they have those letter sounds in, and there's multiple cycles that you can do it, even if you weren't fully buying into this. The alphabet sounds should be an easy first step.
I agree, Rebecca. By mid-year, they should have their sounds and be blending for sure. Kathleen said, I think teachers' phonemic awareness is a major component to teaching reading. Students do not have accurate modeling at home or school, and they struggle. True. Nora's on. Okay, we teach 4 sounds a week in kindergarten, adding 4 more each week until all letter spellings are taught, then move into 2, 3, and 4 letter spellings until all 1 letter spellings are taught. Interesting. Okay,
yeah,
Jen.
and we want to get the one-to-one mapping, so that needs to be very clear. Yeah, that's the whole premise of the alphabetic principle, and then we move them into the more advanced, those 2-letter vowel combinations.
Jen said, when letter sounds are taught in the context of real words and sentences, the pacing moves much faster than when we teach letter sounds in isolation first.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, as McGuiness, we need to expose the kids with the basic code and let them show us what they can do. Okay, Kathleen said teaching sounds and focusing on sounds prior to letters makes complete sense. I had always introduced it with letters first. Marianne said, if we start in pre-K with initial sounds, we should be finished teaching the 44 sounds by the end of 1st grade. Okay, back to Jen. Using a speech to print, children will be much further along by mid-year than traditional phonics approaches. There's no denying that. That's for sure. Melissa said, we need more efficient training for the teachers to use in the classroom.
Yeah.
For sure. Nora, I think CKLA is trying to follow this sequence, but there was not a lot of pre-education for teachers to understand the importance of teaching the sound, not the letter name. Exactly. Melissa agrees, and everyone agrees. Okay. I was talking to a gal today that has done systems change in Connecticut, and her very first tenet that has to happen is education, teacher education, because you can't move forward until everyone knows what they're doing, and the administrators as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Efficacy in the teacher is where it starts. The teacher has to feel,
Exactly.
that they have the confidence to move a child forward doing X, Y, and Z with a certain expectation. If that's not in place first, that child can't go very far, in my opinion. They're only going to go as far as they would if they didn't get any instruction at all, really.
Well, teachers, and I see this a lot on our science and reading site, they want a quick fix. They want to know, what is SOR and how do I use it? Instead of training themselves or educating themselves. It's a process. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't come in a box. You have to learn it. And so that's the frustrating part for myself and my moderators, because they want a quick fix. Just tell me what to do and it'll all be good. And that's not how it works. As many of you know, you've gone through that process, and you know how long, because the target keeps moving too. We just keep learning more and more and more about the science, and things change, and that's our job to learn that. So we have a comment here about Open Court was a sound to print that had 55 lessons to teach the whole code. Marva Collins that used it said any child could be taught to read in 4 months. And Joanne Kellogg said teaching the sound and not introducing the letter name has helped all the students I tutor. Reading Simplified and Nebly has been a big help for me. It's great to hear. Open Court was a long vowels first program. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have experience with Open Court. Had
I
experience.
I don't either, but I've heard it's very good.
Yeah. Okay.
We're done.
That was cool.
Very cool.
Let's go to the next thing. Chapter 10, it builds on chapter 9. Mastering it. So in chapter 9, she really focuses on, okay, they have to take the basics down first. One-to-one mapping, alphabetic principle, know that the code is reversible, speech from going from the sounds out of your mouth to assigning some letters to those sounds. And then my internet's unstable. Okay. Mastering the advanced code now, getting into that for reading, writing, and spelling. So page 50, I liked this quote a lot. Certain types of information help organize memory and reduce the memory load. This is information about how words and word parts can be classified so that there are clues about which spelling alternatives are more or less probable. This classification process is known as orthography. And so this goes again to what we were talking about the last several weeks of focusing more on these probabilities, the tendencies, what pattern is more common versus teaching them the rules that the traditional phonics programs typically spend a lot of time doing. But even though those rules don't really hold up most of the time. And this quote also reminded me of Jan Wazowitz and her Who Moved My Socks analogy. If you haven't watched this video, click it. It's linked in these slides. I will share with Donna, which will be shared with everybody. But we need to leverage the schema of the sounds that students already come with biologically. They already have an organization of sounds in their schemas. They already have it there. They were born with this. We're born to naturally speak, but we're not born to read and write. So we're leveraging those sounds and using that schema then to assign some letter symbols to those already organized socks. We don't have to disrupt it. Let's go with what's already there. So I love it. Watch that video if you haven't seen that. statistical learning, set for variability, self-teaching hypothesis. None of these terms are mentioned by Diane McGuiness in 1997, but she certainly suggests them. It's like she knows about them. It was amazing that she was such a forward thinker that, I know there was research about these things back then, but I don't think that they were really labeled this yet. There was a lot out there. But we know that this is what we need kids practicing doing. Is the scope and sequence flexible enough so that these things can take place for the kids as they're trying out, different sounds for different letter symbols? And we know there's an overlap in the code. So if we come across this first word here, that's the word here, right? They might start and say air, okay, it could be hair. And there is the word hair, but you show them the spelling for hair. It's spelled differently, H-A-I-R. Let's try E here. Then we have art. There's an ah right there. And then we have A right here for in break. And then we have the three-letter in heard. Okay, so we're just making sure that they're getting into those words and being very flexible with trying out those sounds. So I love this picture. I actually saw it for the first time when I read Daniel Willingham's book, 2017, The Reading Mind. If you haven't read that, I would highly recommend it. He had this picture in there, this photo, and I did read that picture of him, and I read it in his voice. This is all to remind us that this is the premise, sound. So whether you're writing, you're spelling, take notice of that sub vocal, what's happening as you're spelling. Are you hearing yourself as you're spelling ever? Are you hearing yourself as you're writing words in your journal or whatever you're writing? Pay attention to that next time, because that is the premise. You are constantly hearing sounds. All words are made up of sound, all written words, actually. So once the kids get that premise, they're good to go. They just take off. I loved her discussion on sight word instruction, pages 267 and 272. She says that really out of the list that were on those pages, there were really only 39 true sight words, but even those, she said, can be, categorized in some ways. And she also states that 80% of English words are multisyllable on page 273. So if this is the case, and we're waiting all the way until end of first grade or beginning of second grade to be teaching students multisyllable words, then there's a problem. It's too late. We need to start doing it much sooner and giving them the strategies to get through those words. Any thoughts on any of these pages? I personally have an interest because my study was on sight word instruction. I surveyed 600 teachers who were actually from Science of Reading type, not necessarily this Science of Reading group, but other Science of Reading groups, grade level wise. I surveyed over 600 teachers, and I asked them to fill in the blank saying, what's a sight word? And I got 5 different definitions. So if we have, and these were just K2 teachers, with 5 different definitions for the term sight word, what does that then imply for how these words are being taught? And if they're confused with the term, how confused are parents? How confused are kids as they move grade to grade, teacher to teacher? Any thoughts on this before I move to the questions? No. Here are the questions. Once the child has mastered the code, he has learned the most probable spelling alternatives for every sound in English. The next step is to add the remaining less probable spelling alternatives to this code. So question 1 was, what are your thoughts around the claim McGuiness makes around the inefficiency of learning, teaching spelling rules? Page 250. And then the question 2 is, learn which spelling alternatives are most or least probable. When in doubt, about spelling a word, start with the most probable spelling first. Check the result with visual memory to see if it looks right. If it doesn't, try the next most probable, and so forth. This is on page 255. Any reactions to this sequence or anything that Diane McGuiness talks about teaching spelling rules or sight words or anything else in chapter 10 that I did not highlight? See, Donna.
Jennifer said a child's understanding of a rule is something that is that unavoidable, or I'm not sure what that word is. Inviolable. So when rules don't hold up, it leads to confusion and frustration. Also, focusing on rules deprives a child of the opportunity to be active, to be an active problem solver who notices the orthographic patterns to jumpstart the statistical learning and self-teaching processes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Marianne says it all goes back to cognitive load theory. Okay, Nora says the different definitions of sight words seem indicative of the issue that seems prevalent around reading literacy instruction. The same term has several different meanings, so confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And Nora says in teaching rules, it's extra verbiage that taxes the child's cognitive load. In addition, the rules have exceptions, which confuses the child. So true. I just think some of the programs that are being used, there's so much emphasis on rules. It makes it, you're boxing a kid into a corner with all those rules, and then they can't,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the opportunity to do that set for variability, because if they don't know that rule and they haven't been taught that sound, then they're stuck at that level. It's almost like we're leveling kids based on the sounds that they know, instead of giving them exposure to as much as we can. They will make adjustments as they go. You know, if we're going to keep decodable text in first grade and then on to second and maybe even to third, wow, I don't know if that's a good thing at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, until I started teaching the speech to print way, I didn't feel like it was boring. Teaching reading was really boring, and now it's really, really exciting because we're getting right into the nitty-gritty of the messy world of reading, and the kids feel empowered. I feel empowered. They're moving through these words, these really long, you know, 5-syllable words, and they're spelling them, and they're just feeling so successful pretty immediately that it's exciting. And that excitement of knowing that they can do this, even though it's hard, it's still hard. It's fun because their excitement, knowing they can do it, keeps them moving through that challenge. So challenge is good as long as it's coupled with that, you know, success, I guess. You know, there's little ounces of success, but if we drone on and on about rules all year long, that's just, it's just no fun. Everyone tunes out, and research shows they don't apply the rules. They're not applying the rules when you're actually reading. Your brain kind of takes over the subconscious, you know, terms of statistical learning, and you're trying things out. So that's my 2 cents on that. Rules are boring.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so Karen Johnson said, agreeing that spelling rules are inefficient, we shouldn't teach something that will eventually need to retract. Seems like a violation of trust. Or like teaching only short vowels, and then we realize, oh, there's another vowel and I haven't told you that for 2 years, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Especially if you're in these boxed programs. The other day, a colleague was taking the word hopped and marking the vowels, drawing the bridge, and splitting the word between the P's. I whispered, it's only 1 syllable. She quickly realized that. Mm. Mm.
Mhm.
Mm. Interesting. Jennifer says teaching students spelling alternatives works beautifully and also reinforces active problem solving while decoding reading. It's what good readers do. Anne O'Sullivan, I think that children with poor working memory will find it difficult to hold on to a spelling rule when trying to spell words during their free writing. Okay. Karen says she has the same ambivalence regarding teaching syllables. There are so many exceptions. Does this also burden our students' working memory?
Mhm.
Mm. And Joanne says, I've been trained in OG and the rules are just too much of an overload for my struggling students. I have taken the rules out and what a difference for me and my students. Oh, interesting. She mentioned that research showed children never use rules when they read or spell. And Kathleen said it's almost all sight words. If almost all sight words are decodable, if your child is using Dolch word lists, how can a student remember all the rules, heart words to read the list given to them? And Amy says, I would much rather ask a child, what else can you try, and empower her, as you just mentioned, Svetlana, instead of what spelling rule should you use with this word? How frustrating for the learner.
Yeah, it's a much more logical and natural exchange of the learner and teacher communication through this speech to print approach.
I used to always say to the child to empower them, what other way do you know to make this sound?
Mhm.
So they're like empowered because they feel like, oh yeah, I did learn this. I just have to use it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the end of our comments.
Okay. Moving right along, chapters 11 through 12, she labels this as the emotional consequences of reading failure. And I know many of us on this call have someone or currently experience it themselves of these consequences. One of which, as a remediation tutor right now, unlearning the bad habits. That's where we're spending a lot of energy for these poor third, fourth, and fifth graders that I'm working with. That is such an interference of the guessing, and just looking at the first letter and they're just guessing visually because this is what they've known and what they've relied on for so many years. That's really, really hard to undo, but they're doing it little by little. If you are required, I love this, if you're required by law to sit for 5 to 6 hours every day in a classroom where you cannot do the work, this is the ultimate frustration. So again, why starting right early, chapter 9 and 10 is so critical. That K1 window this is it. If they miss that window, then they become that ultimate frustration. That's who they are, and everything else shuts down. They don't want to do anything because they really can't access it. And this was interesting. Even the best phonics programs have a fail rate of around 30%. I wonder if this is still true. I think it is, maybe higher. I don't know. I'm interested in it. Going to the guiding questions for chapters 11 and 12 as we wrap up our evening, and McGuiness outlines a model remediation program for elementary schools. How does your school align with the model? What components are missing? So I do like what she outlines. What characteristics does McGuiness say are markers of an excellent remedial program? What about the program characteristics described do you connect with? What challenged you? What extended your thinking? So this is on pages 309 to 311. For me, it was asking myself, well, how long is this remediation taking? That's, I think, the key question here, is if this is taking too long and you're seeing little teeny tiny baby steps, then something's wrong. Something isn't working in that program. Something's missing. You need to change it up. So if in kindergarten and first grade, 4 to 8 months, let's say, for a super struggling reader, we're seeing research showing no more than 60 hours of remediation. And that's like the most intense, instruction you can get. Even with that, 60 hours is too long, she's saying. Somewhere between 40 and 60 hours for remediation. So if it's going over that, then you need to reconsider. But really, if no major progress is being made within the first 10 days or 10 hours or 15 hours, if you're not seeing some kind of magic, something is wrong, based on my experiences recently with the speech to print approach. Comments in chat for these questions.
Okay, Nora said undoing bad habits, guessing, looking at the picture, looking up at the ceiling, using the letter name instead of the sound, trying to access a rule takes so much more instructional time than actual teaching reading does.
Yep.
And that is so true. It's also difficult to get the balanced literacy teachers to understand and accept the research. Yeah. Linda Mood-Bell gets good results, but it is incredibly costly and requires many, many hours of intervention. Yes, $30,000 is what.
Oh my gosh.
It's going for now.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I'm so sad that in my small PK through 8th grade school, students stay in remediation from 3rd to 4th grade and never emerge.
Yep.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good one, Nikki. Length of remediation is huge for our students' mental health.
Yes.
Yeah, there's nothing worse about being, in remediation in a private tutoring sessions situation when they start in 3rd grade and they're still there in 8th grade. It's like, how many years do they have to do that? I had a poster up in my summer school class, stop guessing, start knowing. Love it. Okay, even in my general ed 2nd grade class, I spent so much time and effort in helping my class unlearn the poor strategies they formed in kindergarten and 1st. Yeah. All right, let's see here. One-on-one remediation is what McGuiness says is ideal, but we just don't have the staff. I think that's maybe true. I think I know Kilpatrick's in the research he brings up, it's 3 to 4 in a group is ideal. And Nora says if speech to print is taught in the classroom in early grades in tier 1, there is very, very little need to remediate for remediation groups and hardly no need for one-on-one.
That's exactly my premise, Nora.
That's right. Get them while they're young.
Yes. And they're excited. Those little kindergartners are so excited to start reading, like
Yep.
let's take that momentum and do it the right way from the very beginning.
And who else is excited? The teachers are excited, the parents are excited, the school's excited, and it changes the culture and the climate and the community as a whole. I mean, I have a 90% free and reduced school right now with only 4% of their kindergartners at high risk when we look at the fast bridge, all the components. So it can be done, and it's everybody gets empowered and excited. The system, the instruction, everything is empowered by children succeeding and teachers knowing the next right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. From Joanne, she says, my struggle is having my students once or twice a week, for an hour. I worry that I'm not making the progress fast enough for the parents to see improvement. All of my 4th and 5th graders came to me with not with any of the advanced code.
Mm-hmm.
And then
and that's the stressed cat that that's what all the teachers right now, the remediation teachers in those 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classrooms, they look like that cat because they don't have the time at that point. It's just, there's no time in the day to get to the kids that they need that intensity.
And Kristen Shea says, who are the 5% of children who might not be able to reach proficient reading, writing, and effective instruction? How do we know when we are working with a student in the 5%? What is holding them back?
Mhm. I think that the 5%, a lot of the 5% are going to be the most severe learning disability type, on the spectrum of the continuum. They might have a severe speech problem, as well. That's kind of severe. But other than that, those are going to be pretty obvious. But even the students on that mild, dyslexia continuum, if they're taught using the same speech to print approaches, they will make it. They will get there as long as we start early, or even late, doesn't matter. But early, they won't even feel it. They won't even feel that they have dyslexia necessarily. That's my hypothesis. If we started everyone on the right track in kindergarten and first grade, the dyslexic students wouldn't even know they were dyslexic.
Okay, and Jennifer says, often the students in the 5% have co-commitment issues, vision, attention, language processing, speed, RAN issues. I agree with you, Jen. They have comorbidity, issues with the, like my student I'm working with right now, it's making very slow progress, but I think part of it is his working memory is so poor. And I think there's some emotional overlay, there's 60 years you can't read, and then you have this epiphany that you can, and he's very insecure. So, and I'm sure our kids are going through that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you, Donna.
Okay.
Okay. So I just want to end this evening with this pretty great blog that I found. Bruce Howlett wrote this. He has this site called SoR, where he's trying to spark this advanced science of reading and learning. Welcome to the year 2024, where the reading wars have ended and the reading shift, the paradigm shift in the content and delivery of literacy instruction has dramatically improved the lives of millions of once struggling readers. Proponents of intensive phonics, balanced literacy, and whole language all acknowledged that 50 years of arguing had failed to reduce the percentage of students who struggle with literacy. To move forward, all parties agreed to stop reflexively defending or criticizing past practices. All long-held methods, beliefs, and established norms were open to questioning. Energy once wasted in perpetuating the conflict was redirected into creating an advanced science of reading and learning solely focused on increasing the well-being of struggling readers and their stressed teachers. This allowed fresh and exciting ideas to explode into reality. A vast array of effective and efficient methods long hidden away in research journals emerged, illuminating gentler and more effective ways of promoting effortless, enjoyable, and meaningful reading. The reading shift prompted so much innovation that the field began to resemble the medical sciences, producing rapid improvement at scale for millions of struggling readers only a year after its inception. I think if Diane McGuiness was with us here right now, she would agree wholeheartedly with this paragraph right here. And I think this is the essence of what she was trying to get at with this book, is we need to stop arguing. We have to look at the student. We have to figure out what outcomes are happening and which outcomes are efficacious and causing this, quick and rapid progression through the code in a logical way. And so I wanted to sort of end with this little paragraph that I found. But that's all I have for everybody today, unless anyone else has anything else to say.
Thank you, Svetlana and Rebecca. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. We can stay on for another 10 minutes if we have any comments. We're scheduled for an hour. Anyone? Or like kind of a summary of how we felt about the book study and what maybe you'd like to see come next. Has this changed your thinking at all? Are you thinking of implementing some of this in your classrooms? You know, what are your thoughts?
Donna, I want to just say a thought if I can. This thing,
Sure.
looking at this thing on the screen, Svetlana, my heart, I feel like an elephant standing on my chest. I don't know if I feel like crying, but I also feel like excited. It's a very strange feeling I'm having right now. But I don't know who this guy is or
Mhm.
but I'm going to find him and whatever else he's got. But for me, what's on the screen, I would love, love, love to have open discussion and dialogue and brainstorming around how do we get to this?
Yeah.
What happens to get to, for me, I would love, that's just popped in my head. And I just wanted to say it because, wow.
I agree. I agree. Until we can get past the, personal sort of, right? The personal aspect and like remove that and just have this open dialogue on what's working and what's not. And are we vulnerable enough as educators and researchers to let go of the things that aren't working? Or are the beliefs around that holding on so strong to it that we won't let it go? So it does involve a level of humility and vulnerability on our part to have these conversations.
It's about reducing egos too. And let's be real, this is about money, making money. And the fact that Heinemann this past week, we learned that they're not publishing Calkins revisions, speaks volumes that, first of all, it's going to hit them in the pocketbook and they're not going to do that. So, I mean, it's like, I think the tide is changing. I really do. I'm feeling it. So.
And so how do we leverage that? So I'm at the school level, I'm at the county level, and the access to some, look at the popularity of TPT. When teachers go looking, if there's something they can access that's not way outside of their pocketbook range, right? Or that they don't have to go through an administrator to get approval to get it, and that they can actually afford to access the materials, that is a big barrier at this point, is getting it into the hands of teachers quickly and affordably. That's the thing that I've been wrestling with as of late. How do we get it in a really accessible way to teachers?
Good question.
You know what's interesting about that, Rebecca, that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I wonder why I haven't thought about it before, is like, why are teachers searching, buying, personally? I mean, so many teachers come to us and they want to get training themselves instead of their school, who has all the money to pay for things for the teachers to have. The teachers are on their own researching and buying and paying. And it's like, there's something wrong with that picture in a major way. First of all, they have to go out and search for it all and decide what they're going to buy. What books am I going to buy? What materials am I going to buy? What do I buy? What do I do? What do I learn? How do I feel so heartsick for teachers trying on their own, often in the resistance of their schools, to how do we come together today? And I almost hate to admit this, because it's like, should I tell people this? But I had actually an interview with a gentleman who's a balanced literacy guy. He's a reading recovery teacher. And he sought me out probably 4 years ago. And most people in the science of reading community despise him. And he can be, and I tell him, you're obnoxious. You do this stuff, and why are you doing this? If you say you want to be a uniter, you're not uniting. And he allows me and appreciates me being really straightforward to him. But I did a little interview kind of thing with him, and he wants to write a book with people from all perspectives, and I'm going to talk to you about this, Donna, coming into this book and saying, this is why this kind of reading instruction, whatever it may be, Orton Gillingham, Ebley, balance or reading recovery, Lucy Calkins, whatever, all of these things, this is why in these chapters. And I'm like, that's and he wants me to write a chapter in this book and try to find people from the science of reading, so you can have all of these different perspectives all in one place so people can look at it. And even talking to him and thinking, if I tell people, which I'm telling here on a recording, that I'm even talking to him, it comes back to Svetlana, what you're saying with that vulnerability. How dare you speak with anybody? But you know, every time I talk to him more and more, he's like, you know what, Nora, we're a lot, I know you disagree with a lot of things I say and you tell me right out, but we're a lot more alike than we are different as far as what we want. And, you know, and I'm like, every time I talk to him, I realize that. So how do we go into this white on the black here wording? How do we truly, instead of in our own little echo chamber of whatever it may be, whether it's speech to print or science of reading or balanced literacy, whatever that may be, how do we as a whole make this 2024? I like that. That's a great goal.
Yeah.
I think we should do it.
I agree.
Honestly. But are we willing to talk about, you know what, balanced literacy people, they have a point on certain things. And what is that point that are their strengths? Because everybody's got strengths.
Yes.
We all have weaknesses too. But are we willing to go there? And that's what I said, you guys in your balanced literacy people and many in the science of reading are very much the same way. It's your way or no other way, and that's it. And how are you ever going to get anywhere with that?
I think we've been having conversations for so many years that it's quite interesting to schools work the way schools work. And we have to really, I think that how can we work with the system instead of against the system? And the teaching profession has been so individualized by the actual professional. They see themselves. I think a lot of that comes out of the way we were trained in college, and decentralized government. There's so many pieces to this, but I really look at what UFly's done, right? This is, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, Nora, but where do we get really accessible, easy things for the teachers in real time that have credibility to them, that we can get in and get training? Because where do teachers grow? From each other. So
yeah, I think you being on the inside of that knows, like, where do they?
From each other. And that, you know, talk, just because you have the outcomes doesn't necessarily mean anything either, to depending upon where you are in the context. And Donna just alluded to what was the number one thing that teachers are asking for. They're activity driven because they don't have the knowledge base. And our colleague, you know, the revered Louisa Moat says that programs don't teach, teachers teach. And I always add to that, but programs teach teachers, because I taught corrective reading, I taught phonics reading, I've done OG training, I've done it. And the programs, every single one of them taught me something. Donna we're leveraging the fact that the science of reading is going, there's no time like it ever. Heinemann just pulled back. They've never pulled back. What does Nita say? Where there's a void, someone will fill it. Where's the piece that is easy access, get in a teacher's hand, affordable, no administrator has to go out after it because they can afford it. They get it to the teacher, and then you've got your science of reading advocates, and I'll go on forever about how the fact that I think we need coaches to help teachers put it in place. But right now there's nothing affordable and easy access. What, 30 grand, Linda Moodbell, right there. Right. The sticker shock, there's a sweet point. There is a sweet point. Maybe that's what we need to be figuring out. What's this? You know, you got to understand data, you got to understand systems, you got to understand structures, you got to understand schools. And there's a number. What's the number that administrators are like, ooh, when you tell me that for PD, I'm like, whatever. When you're not talking about an entire curricular piece, what's the point that a teacher said, I will buy that if I know it'll make a difference and with my colleagues. I think that activity driven piece, the science of reading, that it's getting, it has momentum, and that Heinemann just stepped off the stage. There's no time like today, but the person that's on the ground is the teacher.
I have to say, though, with activities and resources, if a single homeschooling mom can access the resources needed, you know what I mean? It's the same materials that a teacher at home getting on like Pinterest could access. But there has to be, like you said, the program kind of teaches the teachers, right? Because I say, until I'm blue in the face, the free resources on the phonic books page helped me, but then you have to accept the orientation that's being taught. And if you don't understand that orientation, you don't really understand the value of those free resources.
Mhm.
That's exactly, Nikki, exactly my thing, because we could give you all the stuff. And again, the stuff doesn't teach you, but the stuff, if you don't know what to do with the stuff, I grapple with that too. What can you give that, and we do that a lot with that bleed, like giving little tidbits here and there of things, but in little tidbits give you little tidbits of gains, and it is 50% better than 40, yes. But I say 98, 99%. I'd like to say 100%, quite frankly, but I suppose there's 1% of kids that will not learn to read. But like that can happen, but not if we dibble dabble. And I don't know, how do you rectify that, Rebecca, between dibble dabbling and really committing? And you can't commit because your school won't let you commit for most teachers, or the school commits and then the teacher doesn't commit. I mean, I don't know. It's a huge.
I think at school, you know, what I'm wondering I'm wondering what Sharon would say about this. What does Sharon think? Are you still Sharon? Done? Maybe she's not here.
I am here, but I'm muted. I'm here.
No, I said Sharon Dunn. Is she
I'm
still
here.
here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
What do you think? What do you think? Your perspective. I mean, if you would want to say, I'd rather not chime in, but your perspective, I think, would be important.
Well, just kind of recap it. Exactly why it's not, why things aren't moving, or why schools
What
aren't.
would we need to do to get this information
Yeah.
to teachers, to schools, and implement it in a way that we're actually making meaningful change?
Mhm.
Yeah,
There's not one right answer here.
there is. It comes from multiple perspectives.
Multiple, right.
I think honestly, legislation has an important place. Schools of education have a very important place. We really need to get that right in our professional training of new teachers. Professional development pieces, it's the basic beliefs, I want to have the right word choice. The science of reading tenants. It's not that difficult. Yes, it's complex, but it all comes back to the same thing. We have to have the right assessment pieces. You have to know what the needs are of your students. Someone said it earlier, matching, it's students centered, matching the needs of the student, the right instructional components for that student to read. We know what those are. It's not that difficult. The data reveals that. Then we need the specific diagnostics. You have to have the system and structures in place at the school sites. It really can be replicated across the nation. We are the wealthiest, the healthiest nation in the world. And we have what, 35% proficient in reading? That's a crime. And I think there's so many districts in California where I am. There's 3, I don't even know how many districts there are. They all do their own thing. It's mediocrity is accepted, meaning they're all busy, they're tired, they're doing the best they can, but there's no skin in the game, so to speak. Like, unless you have a child that's dyslexic, or me as a principal, when I looked at 72% of my kinders going into first grade at risk, not proficient according to Acadians, I panicked. I thought, I'm responsible. The buck stops with me. How am I going to get my teachers doing this? And I didn't know what I was doing at first. It was one foot in front of the other. I just started putting the pieces in place. And I had great professional development, great help, but I don't have the answer, but it's not difficult. It's just getting everybody to that point of understanding this is what we can do to fix the reading problem.
But Sharon, I think too, it's kind of a simple solution. This is what I always say. Ebley is very simple. Losing weight is simple. It's very simple what you have to do. Exactly,
Yeah.
very simple. Not easy to do, though.
No.
So it's a simple, I mean, it's almost a too simple concept, but you just do it. I mean, guess what? Don't eat the ice cream. Don't, eat this, don't eat that. Very simple. But applying it, and I think even with Diane, and I've had a lot of conversations with a bunch of people since this book study started about her application, which I've always thought like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, Diane, with what you're telling me about what we should do, but then how we should do it. I never really, photographics was her son's stuff and all, but I'm like, that doesn't really make sense, because connecting that simple idea in, this is what I found with all the teachers I've trained over the 23 years I've been doing this. They can get it, and we, like many of us, we can get the theory, but the bridge to application and practice is where is the challenge. And like Rebecca says, you need coaches and all, but we have to have, when we're all just doing a whole bunch, like you say, every single school district, I've been in them coast to coast. And I'm like, how can we have so many different ways of doing things, which every single school has a different way of doing what they do and how they do it. It's mind boggling to me that it's apparently everybody just makes it up on the fly. And how do we go to where we get 95 to 100% proficiency when everybody's creating, reinventing the wheel in every single school? That's not possible.
I would echo that, Nora. Even tonight, I'm shocked that people are still saying that. I'm shocked by the fact that people are still teaching one letter a week.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I find that shocking when contextually now I feel like my bubble is much larger and most of the people I know have that information. And then I hear these shocking things like that people don't know what Acadians is, or that they're, or dibbles, and they haven't even
Most people
implemented
don't
them.
know, Rebecca, not just
Yeah.
some people, but most.
It's shocking to me, and that we're still doing a letter of the week. I mean, that's just shocking. Jana's
So
over
to
here.
me, instead of
Nora,
being in our bubble of science of reading, I'm like, I'm hopping over here to this balanced reading bubble, balanced literacy people. I'm going to talk to those people, because guess what? Who needs that? Acadians, what's Acadians? Says this guy to me. And I'm like, oh, have you heard of dibbles? It's like, but it's so true, because we're like, oh, we all know these things, but we're the minority. We're growing, but we're still the minority. And I saw Jennifer put a comment here that she said, in the science of reading, the message is that reading is rocket science. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, I need to have 20 years of learning the rocket science to build the rocket. And where Diane McGuiness, she said that isn't accurate from this book. So that's another cognitive dissonance thing. Like, this has got to be so hard and time consuming and intensive when it's really simple. And in my experience, that's one of the hardest things when teaching teachers, especially classroom teachers, because they want to keep piling on all those other things that have been, made it kind of hard. But because there's so much, instead of simplifying it, we're going to complicate it. And so poor teachers, I don't know how and plus then they got to be on Pinterest and Teacher Pay Teacher and all these places to find their stuff to make their lessons. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are the schools buying all this curriculum and things for? I don't know how we do that. I don't know what the answer is, but it would be.
Well, I think it truly, we need the schools of education to get on the same page with the science and what the research says about how children learn to read. We can provide that substance in college, universities. That way the teachers have the basic understanding, and then from there, the professional development, the districts and the teachers, yes, can learn on their own, but if the districts, it's the right professional development that aligns with science of reading, it's the right materials and processes, and we can fix the reading problem. But it's a top down, bottom up approach.
I think
From both ends.
Yep.
I think we need something drastic. I feel like we need like a march, or we need some
Right.
like a reading czar, like a COVID czar who's going to help us just tackle this. It's not so hard. We have smart people here who know what to do, and it's just getting the information and the program, knowledge into schools right away. It could be done.
I mean, it could be, but like Sharon says, but this is what the background that's holding it back. And I've known this from the very beginning. Power, politics, ego, money. Is education about children and teachers? I used to think it was. I was very naive and ignorant, thinking that that's what it was about. It is not at all about teachers and children. It's about power, politics, ego, and money. If you look at it, that's where it's at.
We have to flip that around. It is our biggest social justice issue of the
Mhm.
day, right? So you flip that around, that power, money, whatever is driving, you got to flip it around to it's the tyranny of the urgency to get these kids to read. We've got to fix the reading problem or we're not going to have a nation. I mean, it's that critical.
I agree.
So we have, and whoever said about a march, you know, it's true. It's like, we've got to bring it to the forefront, a social justice issue. I don't know how else to frame it, but it's like, these are our kids' lives. We can change the trajectory of 65% of the students across the nation to become proficient at reading, at least have a chance in life, have hope for the future, have an opportunity.
And we've had since 1973, between 65 and 68%, 64, 68% of kids have not been proficient in reading according to the NAEP. So what, 73, well, however many years that is, it's a lot of years. It's a whole
Year
lot.
after year, and it's mediocrity. It's just
So, and we talk about it. We admire the problem's been admired so much, but like Jen says, like, okay, let's do it. I mean, what do? Do we take over the schools? How does this work?
Well, we have
And
to
what do you
look
do?
at we have to look at what is working. And some of the things that I do see, I mean, I'll go back to you and I had this conversation earlier, Nora, but I'll present it too. Like the open ed resources are pretty darn popular. Why do we not get put together?
But are they working?
Yes, actually they are. Like we look at Louisiana Belize, we look at what's happening in Tennessee. Yes, they're working. And administrators will look at that because what does perk an administrator's ears, eyes, and pocketbook is free and free. Then if Ed Reports takes a look at it and gives it a higher marking. Yeah. So to me, that is, I mean, I just keep rolling around with that idea. Something like an open resource. And it reminds me of what UFly is doing. So close. I mean, there's $75 for the teacher edition, but everything else is free. And that's so close. It just needs a switch up. So, I mean, that's the thing that when I think about boots on the ground in schools, something that will perk administrators' ears up, that free always is a pretty good starting spot always, but it has to be of good quality. Teacher paid teacher is free, and they're providing, let me tell you, there's schools that provide teachers with a subscription to teacher paid teacer.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, regular, Donna, that's regular part of school budgets that teacher paid teacher, a certain amount is provided for now by the schools. We've got that going on. Hello.
It's incredible.
So I don't know. That's where my mind is, but
So, yeah, Kristen Shea said, hopefully the Truth About Reading documentary can bring awareness and move the needle. You know what it's going to take? I mean, back in 2000 or 1996, I think it started when the National Reading Panel was initiated. And I think it's going to take something like that to change the trajectory.
Does anybody know I forget, what was it that prompted the National Reading Panel, the formation of it?
Congress.
Yeah, and what sparked them to do it? I can't remember what
Yep.
so should we all be writing to our Congress people?
All the time.
That we want another one?
Yeah.
So
Well,
one of the things at the state level advocacy groups that we've talked about before in Colorado is coming up with a state test, like using a state test where the state would provide training and provide testing for something like Acadience to test the sub-skills of reading. And so that may help us be able to compare apples to apples instead of having all these different tests of these sub-skills. And then teachers or districts can say, hey, this is working really well in this one district. Instead, we've got all of these different tests that we're administering at these lower levels. Like we've got the NAEP, but that doesn't really parse out the different aspects of sub-skills and reading. And so if we had something that was required more at a sub-skill level, that would really help inform people and say, hey, what is your school district using?
Yeah. You make a good point. with the universal screener, the consistency in a quality universal screener and then a diagnostic. It's matching the instructional skill to the needs of the student to fix the reading problem.
And then providing training for free to teachers at the state level so that they know how to inform their instruction too.
Right.
Well, first of all, you've got to get people untrained from decades of faulty curriculum.
Well, it's the ease of use, Donna. It's the ease, like, it's just easy to fall back to what you know.
Oh, absolutely.
No one's holding anybody's feet to the fire. There's no reason to change is my whole point.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
You're
saying?
right. You're right.
There's no.
Oh, but
skin
you know what? You can't punish school districts. Oh, no. You know, they
Right.
don't have that. But, you know,
I want
because there's
accountability.
no urgency. Districts don't have any urgency.
That's what I said. There's no sense of
None.
urgency.
None.
And when I go back to the story of when I looked at that data, was that alarm bell to me, like, holy cow, 72% of these kids are at risk. And these are smart kids, even though we have 88% poverty, these kids are here, they want to learn, and it's our job to teach them. How are we going to do that?
I wonder what Diane McGuiness would do. I wonder what she would say
Question.
if she were here. Maybe she can beam down, Diane, give us some, because it's got it, she was revolutionary, and we can't be revolutionary by doing the same thing that's always been done.
We need a reading revolution. We need that.
But she wrote this book in 97.
I know.
Listen to her then. So what's gonna?
No. Well, this is what I think. In some ways, they finally started washing their hands after he died for quite a while. So maybe that's what it takes. You have to die, and a whole bunch of other people have to literally either die or, you know, get crushed like this literacy thing to make true systemic change. You know, and I hear even with the documentary and stuff, it's like, oh, well, how is it? How are you going to really make systemic change? How are we going to make a difference? You know, maybe how the schools are is not a good plan. Possibly. How about that? Maybe we should look at how do you make such a great, big, huge shift in something that's like turning the Titanic or worse. I mean, there's got to be an answer. Somebody's going to have it pop into their head like, wow, let's try this, or let's try, but not trying the same things that have, you know, or the same blah that I've listened to for 25 years, and I think it's probably been going on for 50. You know, so it's that same admiring of well, we need this and we that. Yes, we need the colleges of education, obviously, to change. Let's look at how quickly they change. Oh, not very. There's a few, right? But not, you know, some percentage of them. But what is, you know, and then I've been told too by people who work in colleges, it takes 3 years to even get a change to be considered. And of course, if they really want it to change, it's kind of like anything, they could, but they don't really want it to change. There's too many things tied to that. So how do maybe we can't go in the front door, maybe you go in the side door, maybe you go in the back door, maybe you break in through the basement. I don't know what you do. Maybe it's parents that are gonna truly be the truth speakers here. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, obviously I don't know. If I knew, I would do something about it. But between all of us, we've got to have some ideas of action.
Nora,
not more talking, but action.
Nora, what you just said about the parents is where I think a lot of help we could get some, because I'm in a small private school here in Georgia. And I was the one, and the head of the principal, we were all sent up to New York for Lucy Calkins when I first went up there. So I had to take that course and whatnot. And so then I was the one who started, I got put into a bridge class, what they considered a bridge. So those were our at-risk children. It wasn't really, you know, didn't want to call it special ed or anything. It was called a bridge program. And that's when I started to see all this. I started to get on webinars and I started to, so I've done this for the last 3 years completely with my own money. So now the new head, the principal at the school, I knew her, she was the one who sent me up. She's come back and they've just started to realize, but it was the parents who started to help me because they started to see the difference that was happening in my room versus the other bridge classrooms. And I really think the parents have to be brought into it. Those parents who see that their children have benefited from this type of learning can be a real voice in some of the schools, but that's just my personal opinion.
Well, you know, I have this card that I can see that says well-behaved women rarely make it says history, but I always think really make a difference. And I don't know that it can be through this nice, placid, keep everybody happy like I was raised, and I really kind of like keeping everybody happy, but I don't know that that can be it without having to ruffle some feathers somehow. I don't even know what ruffling feathers need to be, but we can't keep going the same way. We're not going anywhere. I mean, we're going in little baby steps, but I want to play Mother May I and take a great big giant step, and then another one, and then another one. You know, we know what we need to do. Most of us that are on here are doing it, right? Hiding in our own little caves. We need to blast out and build a high rise and, you know, jump.
But, you know,
all over
Nora,
the-
you know, it's a systems problem, and
I know.
it's huge. You know, there's 3.5 million teachers in the United States. We've got 50 states, 50 different legislators, you know,
Yeah.
the Senates. I mean, it's such a huge problem.
But if you start, does it start from a grassroots thing? Does it start? No problem is going to be like, okay, look at all 50 of our states are going to do that, right? We obviously know that.
But I think we're doing that. I do.
Yeah, we're getting more. I do agree.
I think the movie is going to help. I think if we continue this, you know, the momentum is there. We've got teachers interested, you know, our page is growing, as are many others. You know, it's going to take a long time. And I just, you know, I hope I see it in my lifetime, another 20 years, right? It's going to be another 30 years.
I'm going to live to 100, so I got a good 40.
I know, we're doing it together, okay?
Yeah. So we got to push that age of living
Yeah, right.
past a little bit. But yeah, we don't want to be those people like Ignaz and Diane and everybody like we die and like still hasn't happened.
Maybe we need to organize big reading rallies. I don't know. We need to make a splash somewhere, like get the attention.
Well, New York City they've chucked Lucy Calkins out.
They did.
Yes, there was.
Well, I just got an email from a school from there said, we want to use EBLI, and now New York City is saying you can use A, B, or C, and we want to put in a waiver. And they're like, no, you have to use A, B, or C, which there's a big story around that too. I've seen
Yeah.
a lot of people around New York City. But again, we jumped to other things. We jumped out of the fire, whatever that's called, frying pan into the fire. They did. And they have good intentions, but were they purposeful? Did they look at what they need, you know? So now they're going to go down another path, just like they did with Lucy. They jumped into Lucy however many years ago without even, Lucy didn't even have her program, and they bought her program, which is so weird. So she had to create one. So they did that, and now they're going to jump again. This knee-jerk stuff is not going well. In case
it would be good if someone could get to their mayor, because he's the one that's doing it, because he was dyslexic. But he doesn't. So when you read it and you think to yourself, oh God, shut up. You don't know what you're doing. You're not an educator, but you know that something is wrong. So at least he knows.
Yeah, he's trying for sure.
But now you're right, because he's, you know, what are they jumping into? They do have 2 schools that are piloting something. And in the article, I didn't get the gist of exactly what it was. But, you know, maybe if something like that, but again, you know, you don't know how that one's going to go. But he knows that Lucy Calkins is going to get out of his school.
That is true. So that's a good step in the right direction.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think we're going to solve it here, but I would like to. I want somebody to have the answer or a direction. But I think you're right, Donna. We're taking steps. And that is a positive thing for sure.
Is Donna still there? Did we lose her?
Donna, are you there? She might have.
She had some unstable internet, so
Mm.
I wonder if we can just bring it back around and say we're at the end of our time here, and any closing questions or any closing remark from you, Svetlana? Other than it's been such a pleasure for me to connect with all of you every week.
All right, everyone. Very
There she-
good. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Keep in touch with science, speech to print exploration, because that's where we'll probably be advertising our next event.